Good evening. My name is Mahmoud Faisal Elkhatib. I'm an attorney with the Better Informed Housing Corporation, and we're here to you live. We don't have anybody here today as a guest, so I'm going to speak to you about various issues. So this is a live show, and you can call in to the show, and normally there's a phone number at the bottom of the screen, but you can call in, and the number to call in is 312-738-1060, and we are Better Informed Housing, and you can find us. Here we go. Our objective is to build the future, save the community, and help our neighbors. And you can contact us outside of this at 312-533-2688, and you can email us at neighbors@betterinformed.org. And what we do is we're here. Our objective is to provide education information to communities about real estate. And we provide educational programs and resources so that people are aware of the rights and their responsibilities when it comes to real estate matters. So, what are we going to talk about today? So I'm going to talk about a couple of things. I'm going to start out with talking about inspections. Someone asked me a question recently about, well, I'm buying a house, and how many inspections should I get when I'm buying a house? The second thing I'm going to talk about is receivership certification. So, as part of some of the partnerships that we have with various organizations, namely the Dearborn Realtors Board, which is the African American real estate salesperson and broker trade association here in Chicago, and they are national. We're going to talk about that process and what's been going on and what we've been doing with that. So, starting out with inspections. So when you're buying a house, the most important thing is knowing what the problems are you're going to have in the house, if any. And that doesn't mean that houses all have problems. It just means it's possible. And many of our clients, as an attorney, I've represented buyers and sellers, have run into problems where they had a problem with the inspection. So let me give you an example. So I had a client who bought a house. They had an inspector, and they said the water was slow running when it came to the drain in the bathroom. So they took a small credit, they ignored it, or they took a small credit and it was okay. However, when they finally brought in a plumber to take a look at it, it turned out the problem was much larger than they had expected. So the roots of some tree outside had tangled itself within the sewer of the water coming out from under the sink that was draining out, and had broken and blocked that completely, and so they had to actually rebuild and break the concrete and rebuild the entire plumbing and piping throughout, which was a much more expensive endeavor than they had originally anticipated. So what does this mean? So first of all, don't skimp on the inspector. So if your real estate agent says, I've got this guy, he's super cheap, let's go with him, don't go with him. Find somebody, it's worth paying more for it. Secondly, your inspection varies in price, but a good inspector, in my mind, who's going to go through the process and really digs through it, is going to charge anywhere between $300 to $1,000. Usually $1,000 is really high, but I would say between $300 to $700, depending on if it's a single-family house or if it's a condo. Each one of those has difference. I've seen inspectors charge $100 or $200, and in my mind, that's just not enough. Because how much time are they spending for $200? And it's not about the money, it's really about what they're going to do. And I find that inspectors who charge more, they try to justify more, which is a good thing on the buyer side, because by trying to justify and look at more things, they're going to tell you more what's wrong with the property. So a caveat here, if there's something wrong with the property, doesn't mean don't buy it, it just makes you aware that there is an issue, okay? In many cases, it can result in getting a credit from the seller for the issue that takes place. Or sometimes, if the seller has their own construction crews and they do their own development, they may come in and fix the property themselves because it's cheaper for them to do it. So it really depends on the circumstances. But a good inspector is a critical part of the transaction of acquiring any property. So then the next question that came to me was, well, how many inspections should I do and how many inspectors do I need? Well, that really depends on the initial inspection report. And this is where a good attorney is important. So when you have an inspection report and something comes up in the inspection report, you want to make sure your attorney keeps what we call that inspection period open. By keeping that inspection period open, it gives the opportunity to come back and re-inspect the property to verify or dig deeper into a possible problem. For example, The inspector identifies that there's some flickering in the lights, or that there's a problem in the electrical panel, that it's not structured the right way, or something looks wrong with it. Now, next caveat, or caveat number 2 here, is the inspector is not an electrician. The inspector is not a plumber. The inspector really has a broad understanding of various aspects of an entire building structure, and understanding of various code issues and requirements when it comes to building and good practices. And they're trained to do this. Now, the good news about that is in many times they're also contractors themselves, or they're handymen. So the benefit of that is they have a brief or shallow understanding potentially, and hopefully a deeper one, but they at least have an understanding of some of the basic issues you come across. Because they're not an electrician, you'd want an electrician to come in and verify an issue that they raised. So if they indicate that you have, for example, too many appliances on one fuse, or what they call one circuit, okay? Well, that means that the circuit might pop or might overload the circuit, which might create a problem. So you'd want an electrician to come in and verify, is there a problem with the way the circuits are run into the electrical box, for example. That's one example. If there's a problem with the plumbing, if the water pressure is really, really low, maybe you'd want an inspector to come in and verify why the pressure is really low. Although in that specific instance, that's really more of a seller's problem, and I wouldn't bring an inspector for that. But if you have slow draining, that may want to require additional inspector. So these are things that when you have an inspector, you'd want to go for a second inspection by a specialist, and a specialist within that realm or within that area, or within that specific expertise. So let's talk about the water pressure, for example. And I had this with a client of mine. They had an issue where they were the seller, and the inspector came in and checked the water pressure. And the inspector came a couple times, and the seller couldn't figure out why there was a problem with the water pressure. Well, apparently what was happening was when they turned on all of the water, that means every faucet, every sink, every shower head, after turning everything on, the water pressure went to 0. Means the water stopped running, and they couldn't figure out what the problem was until they brought in an expert. The plumber went through and found out that when they rehabbed the property, they missed a few things, and they did not change all of the plumbing in the basement. They used the old plumbing to do that, and when they did that, that was a problem. So the seller on their own chose to replace all of the plumbing in the basement to improve the problem. And what ended up happening was that solved the problem, and the water pressure came back in full force when you turned on all the faucets. Again, you have the inspection from the general inspector that you've hired to come in, and then you have the inspector coming in that's specialized. So you start out with a general inspector. Don't skimp, don't short, spend the money on a good inspection. It's worth it. And number 2, if something pops up and your real estate sales professional can help you with this, as well as your attorney, if something pops up that seems to be a major issue that needs to be addressed, and that usually falls into the categories of MEP. Mechanicals, which is your boilers or your hot water tanks, your HVAC units, your air conditioning units, or your heating units, that's mechanicals. Or electrical, which is the electricity that runs through the building, electrical boxes, the electrical circuits, etc., etc. The wiring, that's important. Make sure, if you're buying a house that has been rehabbed, it should have new wiring throughout the whole house. And P for plumbing, MEP. M is mechanicals, E is electrical, P is plumbing. Those are your 3 major pieces that you want to bring an inspector in to verify that the work was done, or is there a bigger problem there that you don't know of? So, that being said, spend the money on the inspection. You really should only need 1, and if you need more because there's a bigger problem, you bring in the second inspector. And at that point, you should consider what it's going to cost to really fix the problem that came up when the second inspector came in, if it really is that big of a deal. In many cases, there are instances where the inspector, the general inspector, looks at something and they'll raise it as an issue, but in reality it really wasn't. And it's easily fixed and solved. So, in summation, spend money on a good general inspector. If an MEP problem pops up or something that's a bit more, that requires an expert, hire the expert. So, just to recap, this is Better Informed Housing Corporation, where our job is to reach out and work with the community to educate and help people understand what their real estate rights and needs are, both from every aspect of real estate. And to contact us, you can call us at any time at 312-533-2688, or you can email us at betterinformedneighbors@betterinformed.org. So now, the next piece, we're going to talk about receivership. So we have previously, I'm bringing this up because currently I'm teaching a class as part of the Dearborn Realtors Board. They're a nonprofit organization that is an African-American real estate trade organization. So they're called Realtists. So a little bit of background about Realtists, which we've had them on our show before, and they actually have their own show that they do as well. But a Realtist is a person who believes in democracy in housing, which is providing home ownership for all, with an emphasis on black home ownership and brown home ownership. So why is this important? Well, the history of the organization was in the early 40s, when Realtors at the time was white only, and they would not allow black real estate sales professionals to be part of the organization, and so they would block them out. And in times when the blacks were told that they could not live in certain areas, they could not buy certain types of houses, they couldn't take certain types of funding, and there was blatant redlining and discrimination when it came to race, color, religion, as well as very many other reasons for discrimination. A group of black real estate sales professionals came together and formed the Dearborn Realtors Board, and that is the legacy upon which the Dearborn stands on. So what does this have to do with what we're talking about? So the Dearborn Board has cooperated with the City of Chicago to provide what we call receivership classes. And these classes have been held, there was 3 days last week, and the next 3 days are this week. And in this class, you're getting a certification to become a receiver. And the receivership is taught everything from the very beginning as to what the importance of the receivership is, all the way through until how to actually comply and follow the court orders, provide the accounting, how to make money, how to be profitable, what's it about, and how the whole process works. So this is really a shout out to the Dearborn Realtors Board to thank them for the efforts and the work they've been doing in terms of developing receivership and bringing more people of color into the process. Historically, there were not that many people of color in the process, and the direction was that people of color did not have the capacity, did not have the knowledge or the know-how or the legal prowess to actually operate within the receivership space. They did not have the financial wherewithal. That was the stories that we were told in terms of preventing receivers of color to be actually part of the process in a much larger scale. Well, because of this partnership with the City of Chicago and partnership with the Department of Planning and Development, the Department of Housing, and the Law Department, as well as the Circuit Court Judge of the 11th floor, we've developed a curriculum was developed where the City of Chicago and its members step in to educate and teach our members as well as the community as to what it takes and what it means to be a receiver. And they get a receivership certificate at the end of this class. This certificate gives them the opportunity to step into this space and participate in terms of being appointed as a receiver in the housing court for the City of Chicago, or even as a private receiver. Now, why would this matter? So the objective here, and we'll talk about this, and this is kind of where the Better Informed Housing Corp has come in, is to address, and you'll find on our website at betterinformed.org, make a difference. So one of the projects that we have is talking about addressing the vacant buildings and the vacant properties within the City of Chicago. We call them zombie properties. Now, they are vacant, abandoned properties that have no owners, where the taxes have not been paid in years, and the banks are refusing to foreclose, and it's in very dangerous and hazardous conditions, or it is in disreputable repair. So the idea is, how do we go about trying to find a way to solve this problem? Well, receivership being as it's structured by statute, a receiver, once they've done the work, they get the right to attach a lien to the property. Because they're court appointed, because there is proper notice to all parties who might be on title, The receiver does work, whether it's board up, clean up, a feasibility study, cutting the grass, taking down a porch, replacing a porch, fixing the roof, doing work on the property that is court approved. The receiver then gets the right to attach a lien that is a senior priority, first priority, lien on the property. This lien takes priority over all other liens that are on the property. So it comes ahead of the bank, comes ahead of other mechanics liens, it comes ahead of anything that's on title, this comes ahead of it. Now this receiver's lien gives this receiver the power to foreclose on the property and take the property. Now the question is, why would we be condoning taking of property from people or owners? Well, in this case, it is abandoned. It has been declared abandoned. It's been boarded up for years and is what we call a zombie, because it has a body and a structure, but it has no brain, and no one has stepped into or is willing to step into that space. Now the question is, why would an owner not want to step into that space? Well, for example, let's say the owner owes $300,000 on the property. At one time, it was worth that. Well, now it's only worth $20,000. Well, why would an owner spend $100,000 or whatever amount of money to fix a property that yet will still be taken by the bank in the future because we've been unable to pay the mortgage? That is where the owner has abandoned the property. And the bank, seeing the valuation issues and concerned about taking ownership or taking possession of a property that might subject them to building code violations or being addressed by the bank or by the city of Chicago and being held accountable, they'd rather not foreclose and let the property wither away, which leaves a problem for the local community, because that becomes an eyesore. It becomes a substantial impact, which is a very key term, a substantial impact on the valuations and the other properties in the neighborhood. And as more and more buildings become vacant within a block or within a neighborhood, it brings down and impacts the entire neighborhood as a whole. It also becomes a source of crime, a source of drug activity, a source of possible fear that maybe children might get hurt walking to the building and playing and falling or something of that nature. So all these things becomes issues that the city wants to address and needs to address. Well, appointing a receiver puts that receiver ahead of everybody else and gives them an opportunity to foreclose and take ownership and take title of the property in order to then rehab, fix, and sell the property. And in that case, depending on the receivers, which is where we've been really training this and teaching this within our receivership classes over the last week, and we'll be doing tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday, is that this receiver will then, once they've rehabbed the property and ready to sell it, will sell it to homeowners. This way, we're not gentrifying the neighborhood, and we're trying to maintain the character of the community. Well, the question is, well, how's that not different than buying a foreclosed property? Well, like I said, it's vacant, it's abandoned, and it's a zombie. Nobody wants it. Nobody wants to do anything with it. And then the other piece of that is, it provides an opportunity for developers to then acquire properties for almost a fourth of what it would normally cost via retail. So a building that's 3 units or 2-unit building that normally would sell between 30 to 50 or more, depending on the neighborhood, could be acquired for less than $10,000 to $15,000. This low cost of acquisition creates an opportunity for this developer and this receiver to acquire the property and pick it up at a much better rate, which then creates profitability, which profitability didn't exist anymore. So that is receivership. So in summation, through the Dearborn Realtors Board, and we thank the City of Chicago, as well as we thank the Cook County judges on the 11th floor. We thank the building department. We thank the Planning and Development and Housing Department and various individuals and commissioners throughout the city who are working hard to really address and turn around the blighted buildings throughout the City of Chicago. So, coming back, you can see us. We are the Better Informed Housing Corporation. We are located at 218 North Jefferson, Suite 103 in Chicago, Illinois. Our phone number is 312-533-2688. Our fax is 312-775-0980. And I'm going to highlight this for you because you can email us at any time to talk about any of the issues that you want to talk about here today, or just ask us general questions about real estate. Neighbors, NEIGHBORS, at betterinformed.org. Check out our website, betterinformed.org. That's www.betterinformed.org. And in there we talk about in more detail about what the state of the issue is and what's going on. The issue of demolition, properties that have been around for a while. Like, for example, this property here that's been around since 1888 is part of the original Pullman industrial community in the south side of Chicago. It was designed by Solomon Berman and represents one of the city's thousands of once robust cultural assets that have now become a zombie property. This property is on the chopping block in order to be demolished. Now, the question is, thousands of buildings have been demolished. And how are we addressing this? The idea that we've come up with and that we're applying is using the receivership process, because that clears the title when title needs to be cleared. I'll give you a moment to read about a little bit about some of the things that we're doing and what we want to do, and what we do at Better Informed Housing. Now, if you want additional resources, there are resources available in terms of understanding where you can collect into. Now, check out our website, and on our website, you'll find how to look up your PIN number, how to find out about property taxes and delinquent taxes, checking out building code violations, landlord-tenant issues, commercial real estate law, foreclosure. When you can't pay your mortgage, what can you do? A little bit about receivership and what are the opportunities there. Some of the fair housing issues, and rent, Section 8, and vouchers. Now, this is not a complete and total comprehensive of all the resources that you have, but it's a good start to tap into to figure it out. If you have time, check out our website, www.betterinformed.org. And one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to show you, we'll talk about a little about the Dearborn Realtist Board. So let's you get an idea as to who I'm talking about and where you can go to find out more about what is a realtist. So ChicagoRealtist.com talks a little bit about who realtists are. It's about democracy in housing and building black wealth through home ownership. So to give you an idea, when white-only neighborhoods and whites only were allowed to purchase property, that provided in a situation where every family for generations would be able to pass down properties and sell properties from one generation to the next. When you don't have that, and in black neighborhoods that didn't take place. In black neighborhoods, I'll give you an example. When the GI Bill passed out after the soldiers came back from World War II, the GI Bill provided opportunities and financing to white homeowners, but those same financing availabilities were not available for black homeowners. So the black soldiers weren't able to acquire financing to acquire properties, but the white soldiers did, which meant that white neighborhoods got developed, white neighborhoods had commercial activity, white neighbors got to pass along, and as those properties developed, that passed along from generation to generation. And we didn't have that in the black community. And not having that in the black community created a serious problem. And it wasn't until the Dearborn Realtists had fought hard, along with many civil rights activists, that the Fair Housing Act got passed that opened up the opportunity. But let me tell you one small fact before I go. We only have less than a minute left. Black home ownership in 1968, when the Fair Housing Act was passed, was at 40%. 40% of blacks in this country owned homes. Today, in the city of Chicago, that number's at 39%. So in all this time, when we've had the Fair Housing Act, things have not gotten better. They've stayed the same and in some cases gotten worse. So this is a real issue that we need to be addressed. And the Dearborn Realtist Group, they're the ones that are fighting it. So again, my name is Mahmoud Faisal Elkhatib. Thank you very much for tuning in and listening to me. It's a pleasure to have you, and I look forward to hearing any questions you may have in the future. And if you do want to contact us, please feel free to contact us, and you can reach us at neighbors@betterinformed.org, or you can call us at 312-533-2688. My name is Mahmoud Faisal Elkhatib. I'm an attorney, and this is the Better Informed Housing Corporation. It's an honor to be here with you tonight. We wish you well. Good night.